So the big question, the future of Fife house prices, what does it look like?
Well, I think it's certainly not going to be like US house prices. I could tell you that for a start, because the average US house price is $450,000 in the
Jesus.
US. That's huge, isn't it?
Yeah,
So, Perry, what do we have to think about then in terms of house prices for Fife?
Well, that's a big question, is it? The future of Fife house prices, what does it look like? And the ever-changing landscape of the Fife property market, predicting future house price trends can be akin to navigating a labyrinth, can't it? It's the big unknown. The past 2 years has certainly witnessed unprecedented upheaval, primarily due to fluctuating interest rates, the significantly impacted household finances that we've seen. It's reminiscent of the challenges that we kind of faced similar to 2008, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, 2008 was before my time, before I started in industry, but obviously I know how that was, and it's kind of not make areas feel old.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's that time.
Absolutely. I mean, the average rates for fixed rate mortgages have dramatically risen. We've seen that over the last 6 months, notably from late 2021, as we've said. The hike in Bank of England base rates has led to a substantial increase in monthly mortgage payments, consequently affecting people's ability to purchase new homes. You know, the base rate is sitting at 5.25% as of just now. It's a big significant difference from the 1 point somethings we were seeing earlier in the year, isn't it? Do you think that the Fife property market has begun to show signs of stabilisation? That's something we need to talk about. Recently, there's been a pause in the rise of bank of base rates, so that's obviously been very welcoming. And we have seen actually some mortgage suppliers on the high street introducing mortgages that weren't there, that they'd withdrawn when the rates started.
There is new products coming, yeah.
So it's great to see new products out there. So as a company, actually, we've seen quite a few as well, first-time buyers still coming back into the market, so that's a positive. But maintaining the same rates for 2 consecutive months after a consistent increase since late 2021, this stability is mirrored in the mortgage sector, as we spoke about, with lenders offering more competitive rates, which is great. So it is an opportunity to look at it. I guess if you were one of the fortunate ones in the last 2 years that maybe had percentages in the 1 point somethings, still being offered a rate at maybe 4.5 seems quite dramatic, Jim, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. That's not a green screen, by the way. That's the real deal.
Yeah, where are you, Jim?
I just at Necker Island, Richard Branson's home. I was just speaking to him this morning about what he listens to when he goes for a walk, and also he asked me what do I listen to, and I was like, okay, Steve Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, and he says, oh, I don't know that one. I'll have to check it out. But it's quite a surreal conversation that you have with somebody like that, but very down to earth. Anyway, let's get back to talking about this. Interestingly enough, the Chancellor's just announced an unfreeze on local housing allowance at the autumn statement this morning. This afternoon to you, which means the local housing allowance will go up now, which will attract a lot more investors into the market, which will actually, they tend to buy at the lower end as well. So that actually might be quite good news to prop up the lower end of the market to allow people to upgrade again. But could that actually potentially cause a boom again? Could we see this happening? Because now, you know, from April 2024, local housing allowance will be unfrozen. I don't know. I don't know overall, but as I said, you know, Fife's still very, very affordable. And you're absolutely right, Perry, when you said about the stabilisation of the Fife property market. It is pretty stable. The number of transactions every month and every week seem to be the same year on year as they were the years before. So I think it's pretty good news overall. We're avoiding recession as well. So again, good news overall.
I think you're right there, Jim. And one of the things that we constantly speak about when we do our shows is the sheer unpredictability, I think, of market trends at the moment. I mean, honestly, the analytics that you have behind the scenes and the knowledge that you've kind of brought onto yourself and brought to the Fife market and all the updates that we kind of promote to the marketplace, how do you kind of see it come into fruition maybe in the next 6 months? Can you predict, or can you not, or is it just so unknown just now? What would be your initial thoughts?
I think it's actually going to be quite good. Gut reaction, because inflation's down at 4.6, I think. Unemployment's still at a record low level. The wage rises tend to be outperforming inflation just now, if that's the case then, year on year. So I think it's actually pretty good news. Whether it'll actually end up putting pressure on inflation and inflation going up and then base rates having to increase as a result, I don't know. Base rates might actually stay where they are. However, we have talked on previous shows about if base rates actually come down to about 4.5%, it will allow the middle to upper end of the market to be more affordable in terms of mortgage terms. And what I mean by affordability is a £200,000 mortgage maybe costs you, let's just say, £800 a month to finance. And that was a year ago when interest rates were low. Now interest rates are a lot higher. For £800 a month, you're only getting a £140,000 mortgage with the same money. So, that's why mortgage rates probably have to decrease in order to stimulate the mid to top end of the market. So I think it's probably around about 250 to 300,000 we've estimated in the past. And well, I wouldn't say estimated, it's probably a fact because we looked at the analytics and the numbers. And that's the sort of price point where the market starts to peter off in terms of the number of buyers. So for people at that end of the market, to the mid to the upper end of the market, it will take a wee bit longer to sell. You might have a unique property which somebody will jump in straight away and say, I really want that one. And that's the one-offs. So the days are long gone of, my house will sell itself. Because 2 years ago, my cat could have sold the house for me.
And sometimes Jess does put in a starring role and try to.
Yeah, she does. I suppose she does. I
mean, you're right in that. When we look at initial forecasts by many of the pundits at the start of the year, we saw them predicting a significant decline in property prices, didn't we? Savills were expecting a drop of 10% in 2023, whereas Jones Lang LaSalle predicted a 6% drop. Yet looking at the press in the last few weeks, these are opinions that certainly seem to be adjusted, don't they?
Yeah.
Recent data indicate. Sorry, on you go.
No, you're fine. Perry, on you go.
No, I was just going to say recent data as well was indicating a less drastic reduction than anticipated, and the trend suggests a potential levelling out of house prices as well. I mean, when we looked at it locally, I did the Property UK Index update, and certainly Fife is outperforming on the average of Scotland. The average price increase in Scotland as a whole was 1.9, but in Fife it was 3.7. Is that something that you foresaw happening, Jim?
No. Not at all. I actually thought prices would actually drop. I thought they would be negative. And that was just based on the data at the time. And that was probably about a year ago, because we're coming into the end of the year. So it was probably this time last year I actually thought prices would actually begin to drop and probably correct themselves a wee bit in terms of, but then that was on the back of interest rates or interest rates increasing to where they are, but also taking into account that mortgage rates would actually be like base rate plus, but mortgage rates haven't followed that trend. The mortgage rates have followed the trend of the swap rate in the money market between the banks and not followed the base rate trend. So with that in mind, yes, I'm not surprised we are where we are, and the market is kind of still as buoyant as it is, and the prices are actually more year on year by 3.7%, because at that time I had no idea the banks were actually going to use swap rates rather than base rates to fix their mortgage rates.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we look at Fife house prices, for instance, in December 2022, they were 6.06% higher. The average home in Fife then was £171,000. And the last set of figures, when this article was written, was August, but actually we've seen September's now. But the last set of figures in September showed that actually the average Fife price is £180,000. That's still very affordable, Jim, isn't it?
Well, look at the average income in Fife. It's round about the 30 to 33,000 mark. So you're still talking about the 6 times multiplier, and it still divides into that quite comfortably. So as long as you're 6 times or less the average salary in an area in terms of the house prices on average, remember this is all averages, there's going to be pluses and minuses at top and bottom, then the market should be really stable still and should be very, very affordable still in economic terms. Now, I don't mean, 6 times, how can a first-time buyer? Well, a first-time buyer is not meant to afford something at 6 times their salary straight away, because it's all about getting on the property ladder to begin with and then working your way up and building equity within your property, which allows you to upgrade as your salary possibly increases because of your education level increasing and your experience increasing. Therefore, you get more salary as a result. So there's a combination of all different events in the background that work in order to allow you to buy the average house. But as I said, if interest rates start to come down, then the average house might be within the affordability range for people that are first time buying. I remember walking into somebody in St Andrews and they were a first time buyer. I said, "So what's your mortgage approval?" And they went, "Oh, 260,000. Sorry? It's like, what? It's like, really? It's like, I was lucky to get 20,000. When I first started out.
I've got my first mortgage approval, so yeah.
Well, we're certainly showing our age there then, Jim, because my first mortgage was 27,000.
And that was at a push. But that's when interest rates are 10 and 15% at that time. So we'll never go back to that sort of level, because the banks have been very, very conservative, well, small c, in terms of, and prudent in terms of planning for the future, and they're still following the advice and working out people's stress test. In other words, the stress testing now for new mortgages round about the 8 to 10% level. Can you afford 8 or 10%, even though you're getting your mortgage at 4.5%? After 5 years, can you afford 8 to 10% in terms of your interest rates? And because of that keeps the liquidity of the bank very, very strong, which allows them to continue to lend. And the whole point that the market's still going is because we're able to lend. And that was the biggest failure of the credit crunch in 2008, was the fact that there was no money to lend because the liquidity of the banks was done. They were just overgeared completely. They had no money to give out, and they put themselves under pressure, and hence the reason why a lot of banks went to the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, overall, though, these statistics are looking very good considering the dark clouds that were there at the start of the year, aren't they? 4 months of statistics are still left for this year, potentially. So measuring house prices, the land registry is often seen as the definitive measure of local property market house prices. But the issue that we always have with that, and certainly Jim, in our role and within the company, we find that as a challenge, because actually the time that they give that information, there's a date lag, isn't there? It's usually like 3-4 months out of date. So you really do need to have your knowledge of your local market and what's happening. You can't rely necessarily on the land registry, can you?
No, you can't. But I think it's the Bible when it comes to it, isn't it? Because it has all the data that's necessary, combined with, Richard, I think you'll back me up on this, combined with our current amount that we're getting, because we monitor that in real time. What we're putting on it and the home report value. So that's the value from the surveyor versus what we're actually currently selling at, which is under offer and waiting to go through in the pipeline. And that gives us a real good confidence that the land registry data that we're using and using our real-time data together, and that gives us confidence in extrapolating and forecasting the right information and knowing where the market is going to be in the next 6 months.
Yeah, the land registry house price index can predict with quite high certainty, but it's key that, obviously, we spoke about this on Saturday, Perry, that they look this forward looking, obviously, lies in the actual sale agreed. So it's like the property becomes sold subject to conclusion, and it's also down to the pounds per square foot as well.
Yeah.
So it's at that actual point as well. This
is possibly where it relies a lot on feeding back the real-time information to the surveyors, and why you should be using a surveyor. It actually is local to the area and actually does a lot of surveys on houses in the area, because they're the ones that will have the up-to-date knowledge about where house prices are, but also in conjunction with an estate agent who actually understands the market completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And it is about us as individuals stacking all of the levels of information that are out there for us. So for instance, you're looking at meticulous examination of both the square footage, sales agreed, as we've talked about, the land registry index information that's out there, but also our own knowledge as well of what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. Over the last 5 years, Denton House research reveals a robust 90.5% positive relationship between the national square footage sale agreed and the eventual national land registry index over the 5-4 months later. So it does show that that prediction is coming to fruition.
Yeah, I think for home buyers and sellers, I mean, that kind of insight it could be groundbreaking. See you later, Jim. And that means that the pulse of the property market can be gauged well in advance, allowing for strategic decisions well before the official figures roll in, giving them a substantial edge in the actual property market. And that's it. And it's exactly what we spoke about on Saturday, Perry, because it really comes down to the actual square footage price and the actual price achieved at the point of sale and things. And if you've got that right and it's in those stats, then you can predict it quite well.
Well, you can. I mean, it does make sure that you can understand and engage the pulse of the property market. It allows us as well to make strategic decisions on how we can help people, because actually when we're out to some clients, they might not necessarily be selling in that month. There may be a 3-4 month plan in their minds of when they potentially want to come to market. So it's definitely about understanding how that would work for them and how that future picture might look. And it helps them make some decisions.
Yeah. How does house prices differ then? I mean, how does that affect when you look at the actual square footage?
I think the UK house prices are currently 0.236% higher than from December 22 until August 23, which is what this article is. And the square footage data suggests they will end the year between 0.5% and 1.3% lower. That's UK, remember. That's not necessarily what it's being reflected.
As you said earlier, that Savills and others were predicting somewhere between, Savills were saying 10% and 6% drops. And that was at the start of this year. But then obviously, listening to those stats, that's not the case at all.
No, absolutely not. And, when we go into looking at 2024 and 2025, which obviously we're very close to 2024, which is a little bit scary.
Yeah, no.
Literally, we're into nearly weeks of when that'll be. We want to try and get an idea of what next year will look like in Fife. And to judge that, we must look at the national picture first, because it's looking at that national picture that allows us to kind of break it down. And it does allow us to kind of get the trends and then build in the little anomalies that we see within our UK market and our local knowledge. So the first half of 2024, we'll see continued treading of water, we think. House prices may stabilise. Some months there will be a slight increase, other months there might be a slight dip. But by the end of December 24, the net effect will show a national house price around 2 to 3% lower is what the prediction is. But again, when we compare that to Scotland at 1.9 versus Fife at 3.7, you've got to build in your little bit of anomalies there as well. So it doesn't necessarily go hand in hand, but it does give us a flavour for how they predict it. And it goes back to what Jim was saying. It really just does depend on what's going to happen with interest rates. Will inflation be impacted? And how did that all come hand in hand over the coming months? Then we're going to 2025, Richard. What do you think that might look like? Will that slow, do you think?
Yeah, well, then in 2025, there should be a slow and steady increase in average, the average national house price between 2 and 3%. More normal rises of maybe 4 to 6 will start to appear a year, but then will start to appear by 27, 28. So, I mean, you can see that kind of trend building. But another key indicator of the market confidence is the surveyor sentiment, which, although still cautious, shows signs of improvement despite the lower number of property transactions predicted for the current year compared to the pre-pandemic levels as well.
Yeah. I think it's difficult because we do look at statistics, but it's hard really when you're comparing to pre-pandemic, then pandemic, then current, because it has been very different, isn't it? And no one could really appreciate the impact that was going to have, but it does give us a bit of an idea. But the resilience is partly attributed to homeowners managing the increased financial strain that's on them, isn't it? Rising interest rates, they're better actually than expected. You know, people kind of thought that we're going to keep increasing to the 6s and 7s, etc., and that hasn't quite happened. But with minimal cases of forced sales of repossessions, that's a strong thing as well. So, you know, that's a part of the business that you work in as well, Richard. And have you seen a really dramatic increase in that, or have you seen the financial institutions being quite flexible?
I mean, I do deal with obviously the repossession side and things, and I have a bit of an insight into that, which is quite helpful when it comes to thinking about the actual market, and especially the market just within Fife. And the repossession side really haven't been anything vastly different from what I've seen trending over the last few years. So it's not something that I would say would completely influence that. And as you say there, there's been minimal cases of the forced sales or repossessions is what they are. I mean, I would need to see a big jump in that to say it's going to have any real direct effect on the actual market at the time, or how it depicts what the market is like in Fife at the moment.
It's quite interesting. Jim's obviously jumped off, but he has put a wee comment on here, which I'm just going to share with everyone. So Jim's saying it's a great show with great subject matter, and we're going to see the year end on a very positive note.
Yes, I totally agree with that as well.
And I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, and you said earlier as well, we're talking about, obviously, we are agents that try and operate as much on the analysis and stats as we can, but it is really difficult to predict. Jim does have, as he says, he's got quite a gut reaction to a lot of things, but I think, as he states, his gut reaction is obviously driven by how he reviews his stats, and you know, there's a logical side to that obviously then drives his gut reaction, which a lot of the time is quite right. So I do tend to follow his lead because he knows obviously what he's talking about, especially not just the national market, the Fife market in itself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about resilience is partly the reason why it's going to be positive, but one of the other factors contributing to the resilience is obviously the homeowners are managing to save quite a lot as well, aren't they? Yeah. So interest rates are better. Homeowners are kind of resilient in the financial buffers created by savings accumulated during the pandemic. We certainly saw that a lot of people. You even look at hospitality now, you know, everybody was very social, weren't they? And everyone was going out, and you don't actually necessarily appreciate when you're out socialising and living up the hospitality life, how much you actually spend that you create, because you're enjoying the moment and you're enjoying being with friends and socialising. But actually what some people have done through the pandemic is the amount of savings they made. So all of that spending they would normally have, going out, going to the cinema, going out for meals.
How much all that extra spending actually adds up.
Yeah, so people have started kind of saving that. So these savings have allowed many to continue to purchase plans or meet increased mortgage payments, which I think has really helped. And actually there's a bit of a habitual thing has happened there as well that's allowed them to think, well, actually, hang on, rather than spend it on this, what must I do rather than what I need to do? Yeah. we talk about that a lot, don't we? Kind of need and wants is very, very different things. But a robust employment market as well and rising wages have also helped mitigate the mortgage debt burden. You know, and it's like Jim said, when the banks are now judging and swap out, etc. as well, there's a whole different model that seems to have kicked into place, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that like you say, the burden of maybe mortgage debt and things is alleviated a wee bit by that, because people have realigned their thought process on how they spend and what they spend on, and prioritise the important things as opposed to things that are wants as opposed to needs. Do you know what I mean? Housing and things as a need, socialising and things as a want. Yeah. So Jim and I talk, we talk a lot about that on like the Wealth Creation Show and things on a Monday, and it's so relevant.
Yeah, very, very relevant. But I think for me as well, and certainly what I'm seeing just now, and even the people that I'm going out to visit or the people that are making inquiries with ourselves, the landscape for first-time buyers is also appearing really promising for the future. The numbers are potentially recovering more rapidly than home movers, which is a big thing that we didn't anticipate, because you instantly think that interest rates going up is going to prevent that starting ladder point. Doesn't seem to have had that negative impact.
No, it doesn't. You would think that was where it would probably have a quite a big impact, but then we've seen the first-time buyers. Obviously, we've seen quite a lot of first-time buyers coming in to the market as well. So. And
I think for me as well, it's partly fueled by what we've spoken about there in their budgets, etc., i.e. their average wage, their monetary savings that they're making because they're hospitality, but also actually the bank of mum and dad is a big thing.
Mum and dad. I was just going to say mum and dad are in there. Yeah.
Mum and dad always come into play. And I think actually the pandemic has got a lot of people to think about, you know, what is really important to me, what is I need to do. And actually, we're all living longer as well. So I think rather than thinking, well, they'll get it when I'm not here, a lot of mums and dads are saying, well, actually, let's just help them now, aren't they? And I think we're seeing that in the first-time buyer market for sure.
And the first-time buyers they're actually in a better position than what the home movers are, because that is quite a contrast, because they don't have, in comparison to home movers who might have the constraints of maybe the higher rates and larger mortgages because they're upsizing and things. The first-time buyer has the additional financial support. They've maybe got money of their own saved up. They probably got offers of products that home movers won't have available to them to purchase properties and things as well. And like Jim says, you speak to some people now and they're like, oh, what's your approval level for your first time purchase? And it's like over 200 grand. And it's like, okay. My first property was like 90,000. So
it's healthy, isn't it? But I think, yeah, you're right, that seeing that first time buyers coming through, but actually it then flows through the rest of the chain, doesn't it? Because your first time buyers then allowing your middle ones to move up and so forth, and it's a circular thing. So I think that's been really positive. So that's kind of how we see the Fife market in regards to buying and selling. The rental market, however, faces continued challenges, Richard, doesn't it?
It does. And yeah, the rental market, I mean, there are some doom mongers and they've pointed the finger at the buy-to-let market as signs of the impending house price crash, and as buy-to-let landlords are reportedly dumping all their rental portfolios and breaking them up and putting that on the property market. Really, though, the number of landlords selling their portfolios, I mean, it has increased. I mean, there's no denying the fact that there's people selling up. But on average, I think it was just over 96,500 rental homes were sold. And this is entirely the entire UK by buy-to-let landlords yearly. And that was the year ending, the tax year ending April 2023. That has risen to 153,000, UK rental properties. So many have picked up on this as, especially the press, and they've picked up this as an indicator of like a massive landlord exodus. However, it must be remembered that there are 4.6 million private rental properties in the UK. So that disposal only really represents like 3.32% of the entire, all of the entire rental properties for the UK. So it's quite minimal.
Yeah, and how do you see then, Richard? Jim said at the start of the show there when he was on that the increased LHA to 30%. How do you think that will impact maybe your landlord's positions or your tenants' positions?
It will definitely have a positive effect, and it alleviates that position for people who are stuck at that lower end of the level. At the spectrum, obviously, they've had a lot of constraints. They've been priced out of the market because of higher rental prices and things as well. So that's a really positive impact for tenants and landlords alike, definitely. And I think as well, when we talk about portfolios and having this mass exodus, there's fewer landlords. But I mean, whilst we have fewer landlords who are expanding their current portfolio and possibly selling up, I've seen it on like boots on the ground in Fife, and obviously it is a UK-wide thing where we see a lot of new buy-to-let purchases, and that's obviously driven by by looking at stamp duty stats. So they show that they're around 20%, 22% lower than the long-term average. So interesting, 144,000 properties were bought for buy-to-let in the tax year ending April 2023. So in
is that quite surprising to you?
Well, no, but it's not for me, because that's what I say. But I think people will find it surprising, because if we look back at the properties sold, it was and the year end in 2023, April just passed 153,000. So that's how many were sold. But then if we look at the purchases, it's 144,000. So really, overall, it's not a mass exodus like the newspapers and social media and everything. Really, it's quite a good balance, because I know there's a lot of new people coming in. There's a lot of fresh faces coming into buy-to-let and investment, buy-to-let investment and things. So although some people may be exiting and it's maybe their time to do that, and if mortgage rates and things have pushed that that situation, but then there's a lot of new people coming in, and they've got a lot of fresh ideas and a lot of new, like I say, there's a lot of new mortgage products and things from a buy-to-let perspective as well. So I think it's quite a good balance in my opinion, and obviously the stats kind of prove that as well.
They're backing it up, aren't they?
Yeah.
So therefore, with the number of buy-to-let properties available to rent remaining roughly the same as last year, but demand increasing, how has that impacted on maybe the upward pressure on rents, or has it not?
Yeah, I mean, with them remaining roughly the same as the last year, this has created an upward pressure on rents, as we know, and that's been plainly put out there on social medias. But this situation is exacerbated by landlords obviously having their increased mortgage costs, and that's where the need, the increasing need, obviously, for higher rents has come from, along with obviously the higher demand. And I've discussed that many times before in articles as well. Mortgage costs and things, and even like insurance premiums and things like that, these are all increasing, which is obviously forcing landlords to look at increasing rents. I know obviously we've got the rent freeze here, but when they're in between tenancies and things, landlords are then realigning their price point to as high as they can, and that's pushing that up as well. Whereas landlords who have longer standing tenants, that's not the case. So yeah.
Good. It's interesting. So where will Fife house prices be in 2028? That's the next question, isn't it? I think subject to no further black swan events, and what we mean by that is things getting out of control, energy prices, obviously the sad situation in Ukraine, Taiwan, or the Middle Eastern situations that we see. Fife house prices will be between 10% and 12% higher by the middle of 2028 is what the prediction is. Obviously this is an educated guess, yet the Fife property market is navigating through a period of adjustment marked by gradual stabilisation and cautious optimism. We saw an increase last September there, just past 3.7% in Fife. Properties have gone up. It's gone up to 180,000 on average. But while challenges remain, particularly in the rental sector, and we've spoken about those, the overall outlook for the Fife property market suggests a slow but steady recovery. And it goes back to the opening statement that Jim said, that he's like quite surprised, he's seeing it quite stabilising, and it's a nice steady situation that we're in. Variations in different parts of the area shift from buyer behaviour, I guess. Property market adapts. Potential buyers and investors must remain attuned to these evolving dynamics to make informed decisions. And I guess that goes back to what you were saying there, Richard, how actually, yes, there might be some exit, but those exiters are being replaced by someone else. So that's actually, if you're attuned.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to remember. Like you say there, they need to stay, obviously, like you say, attuned to what's actually going on. And obviously, as things evolve and change, and don't just listen to the media and things, find the stats, find people that have the right information, and that helps you make an informed decision about what you're doing. I see a lot of landlords who think, oh, everybody's exiting because mortgage rates have went up, and you know, and it's like, and they just exit because they think it's the right time, when really it probably isn't for them individually. I mean, people might be exiting and selling up from, I'm speaking from a landlord's perspective here, because it's right for their situation, their financial situation. That doesn't mean it's right for everybody else. And I think that's why it's important to make that decision on the right information.
I think everything comes down to circumstance as well, isn't it? And so if your circumstances dictate that you have to make a decision, whether you're a landlord or a home buyer or home seller, depending on where you sit in that mix, actually you do that generally because of circumstances that impact you. And it can be some of these things we've spoken about, but it can be other things too, can't it? It's not necessarily one thing. I was out at a client this morning and they were very much, we weren't planning on moving, but we've seen a house that we love and we'd only moved to get that. And all of a sudden they were in this really positive spin of thinking, well, actually I need to go now. But last week they weren't even thinking about moving. So sometimes something can just come like a bolt of lightning, and it's about speaking to the right people, as you say, to actually get a real understanding of what you should do. I'm just having a little giggle here because I know we've spoken about house prices and me showing my age and Jim. So Wendy's watching us.
I was going to tell you to bring in Wendy's comment, because although she said my first flat was 26k on 110% mortgage in 1990. So although obviously I remember the crash, I wasn't in the property industry at this crash, but Northern Rock, that is how Northern Rock went under, because they were given mortgages at 110% and whatever, and then they left themselves. They were wide open and they were done. And that's it was those kinds of
a lot of what went on there. Northern Rock actually at one point would lend up to 125%.
Yeah, God, I
So
mean,
that was
and that's how
really
they ended up. Yeah, they went to the wall.
it was more the £29,000 flat that I was.
26 now.
Sorry, 26 that I was laughing at. Mine was 27, yours was 26, Jim's was 20, so we've definitely shown our age.
And I was 92,000 when I bought my flat, and my house 7 years ago. I think it was 7 years ago.
Yeah, so big differences. But as we look ahead, which is what we're trying to do here, so it's looking to the future of the Fife property market. I would love to get other people's thoughts. I know we've covered quite a few issues here. We've talked about various topics. We've talked about the adaptability of the market. We've talked about potential buyers, investors remaining attuned. We've talked about what did we see a year ago, what have we seen now. If there's something that we haven't mentioned that you'd like to kind of consider, we've had some comments there. Again, if you're watching this on rerun, please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to answer the questions. Again, we do this to kind of furnish you with information. But if there's something that we've not covered actually that would have been an interesting snippet, then share it with us, and we can certainly share that with everyone else, and everyone benefits from it. Richard, any last words?
Yeah, I think just like you say, Jim Perry, somehow used to be on the show with Jim. What you say is true. People's feedback's great. We could sit here and talk and go through stats and things, but it's good to hear people's individual feedback on what their situation is and what they're experiencing. So keep it interactive. That's always good. But definitely proper analysis of the stats and things like we spoke about on Saturday on the show, you and I, and we spoke about it today. Like even the pounds per square foot at the point of actual sale and things as well. Those kinds of figures are the ones that you need to be looking at. And you also highlighted the land registry index. I mean, reviewing that at the correct time and then taking into consideration, like you say, well, we could look at it now, but we've still got 4 months of the year left till the end of the financial year. So it's known the right stats and the right time to be looking at them and how they have impact on the market. And also, for me, the media's view of the buy-to-let and rental market is wrong. And I think I just demonstrated that there with the amount of buy-to-let sales or like obviously rentals, property sales compared to the purchases. There's not really much in it. And in the grand scheme of thing, when we have like 4.6 million houses for in the rental sector in the UK, it's a very small amount. So there's not this big mass exodus of landlords, although there are people selling up because of their circumstances, and that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. I think my final words really are, and we talk about this frequently, it's definitely about furnishing yourself with facts. And to be flippant, don't listen to your neighbour's sister's dog's opinion. They're no experts. Find it for yourself, get educated.
Or your pal in the pub.
Yeah, make good choices and take some expert advice. And if we haven't provided it, we maybe can point in the direction of someone that can. And that's it from us. Thanks very much for joining. The link to the show is here. If you want to watch it on rerun, read the full article. Again, by all means, feel free to do that. Thank you, Richard. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Perry.